Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and decided to make a couple of baby cards. And I'd started off with the reverse polka stamp from Simon Says Stamp. This was actually the very first time I used the stamp. Thankfully I saved the footage because I'd made these two really fun backgrounds with it. And I am using the Broken China Distress Oxide ink, and I was discovering that when I'm trying to ink up such a large, almost solid image like this with a pigment style ink, I find it easiest to kind of swipe the ink pad against the stamp and then tap it onto the stamp to kind of help remove the lines from the swiping. That's basically what I did. And then I'm using Neenah Desert Storm cardstock, of course, because I have a thing about using these Distress Oxide inks on Neenah Desert Storm cardstock. I just love how they look. So I pressed a piece of that onto the background. You can see I got this really fun, solid background, but I could see that there was still a fair bit of ink left on the stamp. So I was curious and I was like, I wonder if this will work. So I pressed a second piece of cardstock onto this. I knew you won't get as, as vibrant, but I was like, I should be able to get enough to get another decent background. And I really love how I got two backgrounds, one very solid and intense, and this one is a much paler, softer version. So really, really fun. So after they were completely dry, I die cut them with the largest of the Simon Says Stamp stitched rectangle wafer dies. And then for my main images, I'm using the new Oh Baby stamp set here and stamping them onto, of course, more Desert Storm cardstock. Thought about stamping everything on white, but I really like how everything looks on Desert Storm right now. So I'm stamping some of the line images with VersaFine ONYX black ink and this long kind of clothesline style stamp. I used the die and put it face down onto my paper, and then that way I could line up this stamp with the die so that it will die cut because it's so long and thin. That's a way to make sure everything's lined up so that you don't stamp it and then go to die cut it. And it's like, this works, with stems or any just really long, narrow type of a stamp that has a coordinating die. This just makes it so much easier. So after I got that stamped, the solid images from the set, I'm stamping with Worn Lipstick and Cracked Pistachio Distress Oxide inks, and then stamping the coordinating little line images on top with that VersaFine ONYX black ink. And I just love how you get this cute little polka dot patterns, like the little baby top and the little bib. And then I stamped the little socks as well. And then for this stork image and the bundle the stork is carrying, after stamping them with the VersaFine ONYX black, I'm just coloring these in with Distress Oxides and a water brush. I've done several videos showing this. I don't have a problem using a water brush on Neenah's Desert Storm cardstock. I don't use a ton of water, and I don't go over my images like over and over again. I don't try to really do a whole lot of blending or anything like that. If you use too much water, if you try too much to blend, you can start causing the cardstock will start to buckle and it could pill and come apart because, it's not watercolor paper. It's not meant for a bunch of water. But I find I can usually do coloring like this without much difficulty. I can even sometimes add some watercolors to this paper without, again, making a big mess, but I try to limit how much water. I'm just picking up the color with my water brush, but I'm not squeezing the water brush and I'm not adding water, if that makes sense. So I used Distress Oxide for the beak and for the bundle, and then for the actual body of the stork, I'm just using Hero Arts Unicorn White Pigment ink because, again, I love white pigment ink on craft cardstock or this Desert Storm cardstock. I love how it looks. It just, So I use that, and I also use that white ink on the little tops of those little socks. There's something about baby clothes. I don't know what it is, but they're just, anything in tiny version is cuter than anything. So after everything has dried, I'm going to tape all of these coordinating dies into place just with washi tape. And I like to use a lot of washi tape to hold everything down so that when I run it through my machine, nothing moves and everything gets die cut. And then I remembered last minute to stamp. There's this little funny, almost triangle shaped stamp. These are the little clothespins. So I stamped those multiple times with that same just white pigment ink. And then I die cut everything. And then for my sentiments, I'm using the new Oh Baby Words wafer die and the Welcome Little One wafer die. And I decided I wanted that same sort of yellow color, that's the fossilized amber, on the Neenah Desert Storm. So I used my mini ink blending tool and just sponged the ink directly onto this piece of Desert Storm cardstock. And then once I was happy with that, I'm going to trim this down so that it's narrow enough to fit through my little Xyron X Create a Sticker machine here. So I can run that through, and now it's going to have adhesive on the back of it. Because both of these wafer dies, the actual word part of the dies is very narrow. So I prefer running these through any of my Xyron machines to add all that adhesive so that I don't have to fiddle around with liquid adhesive. This just saves me a ton of time. So I'm going to do the same thing for the Oh Baby word, but this time I'm going to use the worn lipstick on the Desert Storm cardstock. Waited till everything was completely dry. You can also speed this up with your heat tool. I don't like die cutting cardstock or anything when it's still wet. It can tear. So made sure it was dry. I'm going to run that through my little Create a Sticker machine so that it'll put the adhesive on the back. And then I'm going to tape these dies into place with washi tape. So the words are going to get die cut from the two colors that I sponged onto the Desert Storm cardstock. And then the outlines I'm going to die cut from white cardstock. And then I'm going to run all of those through my Gemini Junior machine at the same time. So everything gets die cut in one pass. And once I've got everything die cut, I can start adhering the words to those white cardstock outlines that I had die cut. So having that adhesive on the back of these word dies just saved me a ton of time and effort. And I like to use my little Sizzix die pick to help kind of remove the dies sometimes if there are the words from the dies, if any small dies stuck in it. And then also sometimes it helps to just hold on to them when I'm trying to, align things up and whatnot. So then I can just pull these out, line them up on their outlines. Same with even these little pieces like the commas and the dots to the eye, etc. So this just makes life so much easier. I wish I had figured this out a long time ago. I've been doing it for a while, but I wish I'd figured it out a long time ago because I used to avoid using like dies like this, and just it gets to be such a pain to try and, adhere everything when they're so little. But doing it this way just makes it easier. So, and I've said this before, the adhesive on the Xyron machines, it's permanent, but I have wiggle time to move things around and to fiddle with it. It's not till you really press it down firmly that it becomes permanently adhered. So I just peeled everything up from the backing there and then adhered them into place so that all of my word dies are now adhered to their outline. That's another thing I love that companies are doing because I like the look of these like finer die cuts with words and that. But having that outline just, one, emphasizes it, and two, makes it so much easier to adhere that to my project. So after I got everything adhered with the words for this card, I'm going to pop everything up with foam tape. So I applied all my foam tape, then I applied my word die and then my little stork, and then I tucked in that little bundle right behind his beak there. And then once I've got all of that adhered for my second card front, the actual little clothesline stamp, I decided to adhere directly to the background rather than try and pop that up with foam tape because that's just too much work. It's such a narrow little image. So I'm just going to use some of the Simon Says Stamp Craft Tacky Glue and just put a nice thin amount along this and then press that down onto my card front. So then once I've got all that adhered in place, all the other little images I did pop up with foam tape just because it gives it that little extra something. So got everything popped up with foam tape, and then I flipped over my background and I'm going to trim off those two little bits that are hanging off either end of that little clothesline. And I'm just going to trim those off with scissors to even them up on each side. After that was done, I'm going to coat the back of both of these card fronts with Simon's foam tape. So I've already done the one here, and then with the second one, I'm just going to do the exact same thing and just put down strips of this foam tape. And I like to trim it with I prefer my Tim Holtz scissors for this because they have that Teflon coating so they don't get gummed up with the adhesive like regular scissors would. So peel off the backing, and then I'm going to pop these onto my card fronts, which are heavyweight white cardstock cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So both of these are A2 sized cards, and both are top folding because that's just habit. I do get asked that a lot, like why I choose top folding cards. I don't know. It's just a personal preference thing. It's just how I like to make my cards. I've been doing this for years, and I don't know. I just like the look of it. So after I got my card fronts adhered, I decided to add some Doodlebug Lily White sprinkles. I haven't used these in a while. I chose this over using my Tonic Nouveau drops. I don't like using Nouveau drops over Oxide inks or Distress inks or anything like that, because I find a lot of times that as they're drying, they kind of absorb that ink, and the lighter colors like white will become tinted by the time they're fully dry. So rather than risk it, I decided to just add, you know, these little enamel dots instead. And if I was going to add black enamel or black Nouveau drops, it probably would have been totally fine. But because I wanted to add the white, I thought it'd be just better to be safe than sorry. So I used the Doodlebug sprinkles. So then to finish the insides of the cards, I'm stamping the sentiments from that same Oh Baby stamp set with the VersaFine Onyx Black ink. And then the images I'm just stamping with the same Distress Oxide inks that I had used on the outsides of the cards. So with this one, I'm just going to stamp the stork in that same Broken China ink that I used for the background. And then the bundle with the Fossilized Amber. And then I'm going to stamp the little congratulations sentiment with that VersaFine Onyx Black ink. And that's going to finish off my card. So as always, there will be a link below the video to my blog post with links to all the supplies used. If you're interested in checking any of that out, you can check that out in the description box below. Thank you all so much for watching and for subscribing and for thumbs upping and commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.